All right, everybody. Welcome to episode 19 of the Fantasy Timeline. I'm Josh at Real Fantasy TL. I'm with my main man Bill at SuperFlex. Bill, how you doing, man?
Doing good. A lot of exciting happenings in the NFL right now, and it's nice to hear news, some good news for a minute.
Wait, there's been stuff going on in the NFL?
Yeah, maybe we'll talk about it in a bit.
Oh, wow. You'll have to catch me up. I really
Sure.
haven't heard anything. So yeah, obviously, we're joking around. Free agency, the legal tampering period started on Monday, and a lot of things became official today. So, amongst all of this bad news that we've been receiving, finally we kind of get a little bit of a break and we get some news. I mean, if you're listening to this and follow any of the 32 NFL teams, there have been some big changes and some big shakeups on your team for sure. I know on your Lions, Bill, they seem to be signing every ex Patriots defensive player that I think they even signed Teddy Bruschi and Richard Seymour. So they're signing everybody. They're trying to bulk up that defense because obviously that was the real weakness of the Lions last year. And my Cowboys, I don't know what exactly they're doing with Dak. I'm hoping Jerry has a plan. Amari got some big time money after I saw a lot of people on Twitter saying that Jerry was a fool for letting him hit free agency, and I told people calm down. Just because they hit free agency doesn't mean that their original team can't bring them back into the fold. And all the rumors and everything were going around saying that Amari wanted to be there, and that Jerry and Amari's representation had been talking and having a lot of detailed talks about getting a contract done. So I did hear that Washington had offered a lot more money for Amari's services, but he wanted to play in Dallas, so they got that deal done. Hopefully, they get a Dak deal done soon. If not, he'll have to survive on the $33 million he makes this year, and hope for the best. But Bill, we chit chatted a little bit here with free agency. Hold on. There we go.
Hey, sorry guys.
No problem,
No, you're
man.
good.
So if you're in the chat right now, you just saw our man Ethan Turner pop in. The doctor is now in the house. So Ethan, we were just chatting about NFL free agency. Who's your favorite NFL team?
I'm a Steelers fan, so
Steelers.
I like watching the Steelers.
So they got 2/3 of the Watt trilogy in Pittsburgh now.
Yeah, we're working on I think we're gonna throw like a 7th round compensatory pick, and I think that should be enough to get JJ from the Texans at this point. We'll see when they might talk us up to a 6th, but we're gonna do our best.
Yeah, and I actually put out a tweet after the Hopkins trade, and I said, "Wow, all Arizona had to do was throw David Johnson and a 6-piece chicken nugget to get DeAndre Hopkins." So yeah, I mean, you might have to throw in some of Bill O'Brien's favorite fast food, but I think you can get it done. I think a 6th and maybe a Big Mac will get you JJ Watt. So we'll see, but. Yeah, so we're gonna go around the horn here. I want each of you guys to kind of pick one transaction, trade, pickup, signing, whatever that you guys saw during this free agent period, and just kind of give your quick fantasy analysis on it. So, Bill, why don't you go first? Why don't you pick one and go with it?
Sure. Well, I think I'm going to go with the Stephon Diggs trade. It's an interesting one to me because it just doesn't seem like it fits. I don't think. Like I feel like that kind of hurts Stephon Diggs a little bit, just because the inaccuracies of. I think okay, so I think it helps Josh Allen.
Mhm.
It probably hurts John Brown a little bit. But my concern is like there's just not going to be like he's so inaccurate. Like he was like one of the worst, like the least accurate deep passers in the NFL last year. So and like Kirk Cousins was like top 5. So the concern is like if he's frustrated with Kirk Cousins, how frustrated is he going to get with Josh Allen just rifling it over his head? So my thought is that we're going to see probably his ceiling is like what he did this year with Minnesota. As for the actual trade, I mean, hey, like I that's a pretty hefty trade, but that's probably what you got to pay for a upper tier wide receiver.
Is it though?
Yes. So I'm sure somebody else will be talking about that one. So I will, but I think that's the biggest thing, at least for Buffalo, how that affects the Vikings. I mean, I don't think it really changes too much for Thielen, but I think that it could help Irv Smith a little bit. I think there might be a little bit more opportunity, and also keep in mind that there's different offensive coordinator, so they may not be relying so much on the run game as they did. But I mean, that's all dependent on Zimmer and what he wants to do. Kubiak typically does throw a decent amount, so that could help the pass catchers a little bit more. But I can't imagine they're going to run as much as they did last year. So, but Irv Smith's probably the guy I'm most excited for in Minnesota from that trade.
Yeah, I loved Irv Smith. He's been one of the guys that I've been yelling at people all off season to go and grab. I think it might be a little bit harder now that Diggs is out of town. But even when Diggs was there, he was a guy that I wanted on my team. If this wasn't the year that he was going to blow up, I feel like it was going to be 2021. So kind of buy a little early to get a guy who has all the physical talent to be a top 5 tight end. But yeah, I like that. Ethan, what's the one part of free agency that you saw and kind of?
I mean, there's definitely a few. I'll save the obvious one. I'll let you guys have that one. The one I think that I'm the most intrigued by is probably Teddy Bridgewater, going to Carolina on a 3-year deal. I just think that that's a really interesting landing spot for his skill set specifically. We obviously he's got some interesting weapons there. I'm not a Curtis Samuel guy, but some people like him. Obviously, DJ Moore and Christian McCaffrey are going to eat. I wonder if they're going to add a tight end. Doesn't look like Greg Olsen is going to end up there. And so, or no, Greg Olsen already did he already signed in Seattle. So, I mean, they've got Ian Thomas though, so maybe they don't need another tight end. I kind of like Teddy in this offense. I think that, we're going to see Bridgewater with an offensive coordinator and Joe Brady that really, I mean, that dude knows how to scheme guys open. And so when I look at this team, I think about Joe Brady specifically, you see what he did at LSU with 2 pretty good receivers in Justin Jefferson and Jamar Chase. Now, I'm not saying I think Jamar Chase is probably the best wide receiver prospect in the country for next year's draft. Yep. I like Justin Jefferson. He's in I would say, I haven't done my official pre-draft rankings, but Justin Jefferson's definitely locked into my top 10 wide receivers in this draft. And this is a deep wide receiver class. So, I mean, these are 2 good players, but they're built similarly to a Curtis Samuel and a DJ Moore. Now you got a quarterback in Teddy Bridgewater, who's historically been while he's not been a world beater quarterback, he's accurate, especially in the short and middle of the field. That's where Joe Brady was basically using Joe Burrow to excel with these guys that can get open in those areas, and then you create with yards after the catch. I'm very, very curious to see. Teddy Bridgewater is a guy that I'm sending a lot of trade offers out in SuperFlex leagues. If I can get him for a second, I'm all over that. Even 2 seconds. I mean, I'll trade a second this year, a second next year. I've seen that get it done with certain league mates. So, that's a guy that I'm looking to acquire, just because I think that offense is going to be tailored to his skill set specifically. And they've got a brand new coaching staff. So everyone who's talking about, Cam Newton and, and what's going to happen with him, I mean, that's interesting from a storyline perspective. Obviously, I'm waiting to see what happens there. But to me, obviously, these two coaches, Joe Brady and Matt Rule, looked at the landscape of quarterbacks and said, you know what, Cam he's not really going to fit what we want to do here on offense. Let's bring a guy like Bridgewater in, who we do think is going to fit and could possibly be that guy for us, and see if we can't really, truly unlock his potential. And let's not forget, I mean, 5 years ago, you're looking at an 11-5 season from Bridgewater. So, I mean, while he didn't put up like astronomical numbers in that year, he also didn't have nearly what the weapons that he's going to have in this Carolina offense. That was not the same Minnesota team that we see on the field, well, minus Diggs today. So I'll be really curious to see how Bridgewater plays in this. And they have a draft pick too. So, we could be looking at another piece, probably not on the offensive skill positions, but if they add an offensive tackle from this class, I mean, you're looking at a line that was already good. You got an elite offensive tackle class. This could be an offense that produces fantasy points. And of course, Teddy Bridgewater, he's always going to be able to run if he needs to. It's not the majority of his game, but he's got that in his wheelhouse. So, these are all good things that I want to see in fantasy. I want to see how this plays out, just because I'm curious more than anything.
So Ethan, you're a real doctor. I just play one on TV. Does Teddy Bridgewater have an increased chance of injury to that leg that he had, that catastrophic injury? I mean, I know it's been, like you said, 5 years, but is that anything that fantasy players should worry about?
I would say in the immediate, no. Obviously, anytime you have a major injury like that, I'm always concerned about how many years it takes off the back end of their career. I think too much we talk about how quickly a guy is going to return, and we don't talk enough about what's going to happen at the back end of his career because of this injury. Did we just lose 8 years on the back end and one right now? I mean, that's a 9-year loss in career. And I think it's something that isn't out of the realm of possibility. Obviously, with a guy like Bridgewater, major catastrophic knee injury. I mean, basically his knee exploded. I mean, there's no really good way to describe this. He dislocated his knee, which is, I mean, it's worse than just an ACL tear by a long stretch. So, we're going to see. This is really the first chance that we've seen him, basically since that injury, someone say, hey, we like your skill set and we want you to be, a starter for our team. And so we're going to see, is he able to come back and be a solid fantasy asset, or is this knee going to be something that maybe creeps up on him when he gets a full slate of games in? It's a lot easier to hold the clipboard than it is to actually play in 17 games now. I'm going to have to get used to that. Plus 17 plus games. And so the risk is always going to be there, but the fact that he has stayed for the most part pretty healthy since returning is a good sign. I mean, there's just no way to know. I mean, he's only played, I think he's only played in started 6 games since that injury. And so it is a question for sure, but he is only 27. So I still think 3-year window, it's probably fine. I think with him, it's probably more of a 1.5 to 2-year window, because I just feel like this team there's no incentive for them to if he doesn't produce, there's no reason for them to keep him.
Right.
And so I think from that perspective, you're looking at a 2-year window, but still, if he puts up, QB2 numbers for 2 years and you only have to trade a couple seconds for him in a SuperFlex league, I mean, that's worth the investment to me.
Right.
Yep, and his contract is actually built that way to where that 3rd year they could easily get out of it without much of a hit. So
I haven't looked into the contract details.
Yeah,
but
so this
that makes
year,
perfect sense to me.
Yeah, this year you got them, and if they're not happy this year, you'll see them make a move for he's their bridge next year, and then they just move on from there. So, like you said, I think that 1.5 years is pretty pretty conservative.
Yeah. So you guys talked on kind of some big points. Obviously, Ethan talking about a new quarterback, and it seems like this year is so weird because it seems that half the teams in the NFL are either going to have a new starter or a new backup by the time we kick off. And Bill, you talked about one big wide receiver going to a new place. I'm going to take the low-hanging fruit here because I told Bill before we went live that I was probably going to curse, and here I go. What the hell is Bill O'Brien doing? Like, what in the actual hell is he? Like, did he just sit around and go, you know what? No one can fire me. Fuck it. Let's go. And I'm trading DeAndre Hopkins for David Johnson, a 2nd and a 4th. Now, first of all, if Arizona came to me and said, "Hey, I need you to take David Johnson and pay him all of his money," I'd be like, "Cool, let's talk about a 1st-round pick because that's what I'm going to need in order to take that trash contract." Oh, you guys want DeAndre Hopkins too? All right, guys, that's going to be another 1st-round pick because I don't know, he's one of the best 2 wide receivers in the game. They got a 2nd and a 4th. I mean, I know the NFL is a totally different world from what the rest of us live in, but I don't know how anyone can be that terrible at their job and still be employed. It's funny because I saw someone right after the trade went down put up a Twitter poll and said, "Hey, this trade just went down in my league." And everyone got the joke because it was DeAndre and a 4th-round pick for David Johnson, a 2nd and a 4th. And everyone got the joke, but it's so true. If you saw that trade go down in your league, you would immediately be going to your commissioner and saying, "Hey, dude, something's not right. I don't know if this is collusion. I don't know if this guy has never played fantasy before, but we
something's wrong here.
Yeah, we can't let this trade stand." And Bill O'Brien was like, "No, man, it's cool. I don't need DeAndre Hopkins." What is Deshaun Watson thinking right now?
Deshaun Watson should be begging his way out of here. Like, if I'm him, I'm calling my agent today, and I'm like, "Hey, get me out. Get me anywhere. Call Dallas. See what Dallas wants to give.
Call New England.
I'll play for them. Call New England. Get me out of here." Because I mean, can you imagine the Deshaun Watson has to be sitting there like, "Oh, great. We're just throwing away a Super Bowl window here."
Yeah.
For a 4th and David Johnson. Like, I'm sorry. Like, I love David Johnson as much as anybody, but this is a bad trade. A bad trade.
Who is Watson throwing to? I mean, Kenny Stills, Will Fuller, and Kiki Kuti are going to play combined 12 games next year. So who's he throwing to for the rest of the season? Like, it's not even the fact that they traded DeAndre Washington.
DeAndre Washington. There's a name I haven't heard in a while.
I mean, that's pretty much who they traded for. But they traded DeAndre Hopkins for nothing. And it's not, everyone's like, well, they're going to sign Amari Cooper. Well, That didn't happen. They got Randall Cobb, so I guess Randall Cobb is now wide receiver 1 in Houston. And I saw everyone on Twitter, DeAndre Hopkins and Randall Cobb don't play the same, And it's like, come on, guys. First of all, you know what everyone is saying. You got rid of Hopkins, and all you came up with was Randall Cobb. I'm a Dallas Cowboys fan. Randall Cobb was a great number 3 receiver last year. That's what Randall Cobb is at this point, a great number 3 receiver.
Well, he's a slot. I mean, they just play different positions. They do. And
they do, but you exchanged one for the other because they didn't trade for Stephon Diggs. And by the way, Bill O'Brien may be the biggest beneficiary from the coronavirus because if people could actually leave their homes, they may have burned that building down. So Bill O'Brien, thankful that there's a worldwide pandemic.
Here's the thing that kills me, though, is that it was so quick. Like, Did you not shop him?
Right.
To anybody? No. There's no way. Like, this is a classic example of, like, you're in a fantasy league and a dynasty league, and a guy's like, might be looking to trade this guy. And then you're the first one to get to him, and he's like, yep, deal accepted. And then everyone else in the league is like, oh, dude, you just got totally just swindled. Like, why didn't you shop that guy better? He should have, we should have shopped him around. I could have given you twice as much as that guy. That's what every other team in the league is thinking right now. Mm-hmm. Because I'm telling you, there's 31 teams in the NFL that would benefit from having DeAndre Hopkins on their team. Yeah. And so I'm just there. To me, there's no chance that this deal didn't happen basically overnight, because it seemed like I heard a report about it the day before it happened that was like, oh, DeAndre Hopkins might be available via trade. And then the next day it's like, there's a trade going down for him. And I'm just thinking, this is just textbook bad management here. I mean, you can talk about the taking on the David Johnson contract, which was a bloated it's a miracle that they got out from under that contract anyway. But to do it into flipping for DeAndre Hopkins is just like world-class maneuvering by the Cardinals. This is a textbook example of the people running the Cardinals organization know what they're doing, and the people running the Texans have no freaking clue. And so it's just stunning to me. Every time I think about this trade, I just think, like, how could you let a top 2, 3? I mean, is anyone have an objection to top 3?
No.
Wide receiver on the planet right now.
No.
Anything, I
mean, Michael Thomas has an argument for sure. Mm-hmm. I think that, that's an easy one. But, like, outside of Thomas, DeAndre Hopkins is probably the best wide receiver on the planet. I think we can. I'm trying to think of even a name that comes close. I mean,
well, and those two guys are probably the two best sets of hands in the NFL. Like, exactly. Removing anything else. I mean, those guys are just incredible. And I don't think anybody's going to ever argue with you if we just say conservatively top 3. And I mean, Diggs is a lot further behind.
You moved him for pennies, and people talking about, oh, well, Diggs and Hopkins are comparable players. No, I'm sorry, but they're not.
No,
they're not comparable players. I like Diggs. Diggs is maybe top 15, top 10. I mean, maybe you can argue top 10. I would say probably top 15, top 20 wide receiver in the league right now. And that's up for debate on who you like and who you don't like. Sure. So it blows my mind. I just can't believe. And I have a dynasty league where I have both David Johnson and DeAndre Hopkins on a team. And this was like actually not too bad of a deal for me, because having Hopkins move to an offense with another good quarterback whose offensive line hopefully improves with this draft. Like I said, elite offensive tackle class, next to a guy like Larry Fitzgerald, next to a guy like Christian Kirk. I mean, Kyler Murray is going to be his best friend. And so Kyler Murray asking for CD Lamb and them giving him DeAndre Hopkins must feel like you ask for a you ask for a bike and your parents get you a brand new Lamborghini. I mean, it's just like world class maneuvering by the Cardinals because there's no way Kyler Murray is sitting there thinking, well, I'd still kind of like CD Lamb at 8. He might think that, but they're going to go. I feel like it's pretty much locked in that they're going offensive line here.
Yeah.
And that is best case scenario for Kyler Murray too. This was better than best case scenario for Kyler Murray. He's getting a top 3 wide receiver and probably an elite offensive tackle prospect in the same year. I'm just amazed they didn't have to give up more than what they gave up. That first rounder should have absolutely been in this deal, and yet it wasn't. So it's amazing.
Let's kind of talk more about the fantasy impact of this. So if you are looking at let's go with Arizona first. Does this help Hopkins or does it hurt him? Personally, I think it might hurt him slightly just because they like to spread the ball around a little bit more. But he is incredible. So is that going to change because he's just, you can throw it wherever you want and he's going to go get it?
I think the scheme is going to be more creative to get him open. Yes, they spread the ball out more, but I still feel like he's locked into 140 targets, probably that ballparking, probably right around there. And, he's catching the majority of those. And so I just feel like, to me, I don't think Kyler is quite as refined of a thrower as Deshaun Watson is, but I do think that he's going to be able to throw enough to make Hopkins still comparable as a top 5 wide receiver this year. David Johnson, I think, is the more interesting one for me, at least in terms of fantasy value, because what do? Do you hold on and hope that he comes back to form, or do you flip high? That's kind of what I'm thinking I'm going to be doing with most of my David Johnson shares, is trying to get late first, maybe, or first next year, and flip him immediately because I don't think that he's the same guy that he was 3 years ago.
Right. What do you think? What do you think the value is, Josh, for DJ?
It doesn't change for me because, it's still so mind blowing to me that I can't even talk sometimes. So Houston isn't a team that throws a ton to their running back, which is what increases David Johnson's value. So I don't think he's going to get this huge. Now, they don't have anyone else to throw to, so he might get.
Do you think they move him into? Do you think they actually throw him out wide?
I hear this. I heard Arizona was trying to play him in the slot at some point. I just don't think that it's going to happen. It sounds good in theory, but it's a move that NFL teams almost never make. So, we've seen guys. We've seen Lamar Miller be okay. We saw Carlos Hyde be okay last year.
But they don't catch passes.
But Lamar Miller had some pass catching ability, and the offense never. I don't think Bill O'Brien's offense really caters to a pass catching running back,
which is odd because they just traded for Duke Johnson and David Johnson,
and we saw Duke Johnson last year, and there was really no change in what he did from when he was in Cleveland. And the hype was that he was going to go to Houston and be this, he was going to blow up because now he was finally free of his shackles, and Carlos Hyde was the only other guy there, and it was more of the same. So I love Ethan's greed talking about a late first round pick. I love it because I'm
greedy too. I love it early too, second, late first.
I'm
mid second.
Now I saw him go for the 202. That's the highest I've seen him go, and a 2021 first. So there are people out there.
Wow.
If you're listening, there are people out there willing to pay that price, and so I'm looking for those people. If I have David Johnson,
all of those people are Bill O'Brien playing Dynasty. because he's the only person that puts that much value onto David Johnson. But yeah, I mean, obviously at this point, if you could give me a ham sandwich and I would trade you David Johnson, because I don't think he's going to get a major boost in this offense. And B, I don't even know if he's going to be able to stay healthy. And that's another thing that worries me, that, we talked about Arizona's offensive line and their trash. Houston didn't have that great of an offensive line either. So,
yeah.
I don't know, what does he play? You're hoping you can get maybe a half a season out of him. If I have him on my team, I'm waiting for that blow up game to say, hey, DJ's back, and try to ship him for something, because.
So, and actually on the DJ front, like, do you think it was just like his back was bothering him so bad towards the end of the season? Is that what it was, Ethan? And is that something we got to be worried about for the rest of his career? Or is this something that, we should feel like with this rest and everything that he should be back to whatever his normal is?
I think it was a combination of things for David Johnson. I think one, Kenyon Drake came in and played better. He outplayed him. And so the team had to make a decision. Obviously we've seen the gifs of him, David Johnson, trying to run and just looking like he had no burst. He had no explosion. I think the team knew that David Johnson was hurt and that he probably wasn't going to give them anything to the end of the year. And I think that that's when they decided to trade for Drake. And so to me, I think we should have expected, I guess, David Johnson to kind of peter out at the end of the year. I mean, the team was telling us one, he was on the injury report. Two, he missed a couple games. All the signs were that something was wrong with him. And so should we really have been that surprised that his year ended the way that it did? I mean, I know I'm not really, but at the same time, like, these injuries are piling up. I mean, these are, back and ankle injuries, obviously at the wrist. I don't think that's going to be an issue again. That was kind of that's one of those a one-time thing. That's a fluke to me. You don't see people repeatedly tearing ligaments in their wrist. The ankle and back stuff, that is stuff that it comes back, and it does give you trouble. And so I think the one kind of saving grace with David Johnson, and the best argument that you make right now for him being valued at a late first or early second or a first next year, is I would tell people, go look at how he played before he got hurt. And so look at the games that he had before he got hurt last year, and just see the production that he was able to put up. I mean, the first game of the year, 82 yards on the ground, 6 catches, 55 yards through the air, and a touchdown. Second game, not as good. 14 yards. I think he may have gotten hurt. He may have sprained his ankle in this game, but 14 yards on the ground with a touchdown. That's still a startable week. Then he went 37 on the ground, but 6 passes for 28 yards and a touchdown. Again, a playable week. 40 yards on the ground, 8 receptions for 99 yards. I mean, obviously his best value is through the air still. Then, week 5, he went 91 yards on the ground, 3 catches for 65 yards. That's a really nice game. And then he went 34 with a touchdown with 6 catches for 68 yards and a touchdown. And then he hurt his back. And then basically the rest of the year he was useless.
Right.
And so it's not rare, but it's rare in that typically when you see a guy have an injury, you'll see good stats and then it will drop, and then they just won't play the rest of the year. With Johnson, you can look at the game logs. I mean, that's what I'm looking at literally right now. And you can see, 18 rush attempts, 11 rush attempts, 11 rush attempts, 17 rush attempts, 12 rush attempts. And then you're seeing these targets 7, 9, 11, 5, 8. And then it just disappears. And you can see actually, basically after week 6, they didn't use him at all. 1, because he wasn't effective. And 2, eventually they brought in Kenyon Drake and he became the bell cow back. And so that's the argument I make to people, is that, hey, he got hurt. I mean, what are you going to do? I mean, yes, that depresses his value, but what if he becomes, Carlos Hyde with some catching upside at Houston next year? Carlos Hyde ran for like 1,000 yards in that offense with a bad O-line. So there's potential there. I mean, I think that the case is easy to make. It's all about just finding the right buyer, just like with any player. You got to be able to sell it to him, and that's part of the sell job that I'm using right now. Is basically look at what he did before he got hurt, and then tell me that he can't do that again. Because I think it's a lot harder to argue when you make them go back to the games that he played, and somebody out there is looking at the top end of those games and going, he can do that again. Texans are, they got a good quarterback. They're losing DeAndre Hopkins, so there's going to be targets in that offense, and that's the case that you make for them. And then you say, okay, well, send me the 201 and I'll give you David Johnson. And then that's how that kind of deal gets done. Maybe it's not until the draft, but right now is the best time, I think, to trade for picks, because there's a lot of uncertainty. The combine came out, there's guys falling, there's guys that are hurt. We don't know where people are going to go. There's a little bit of that uncertainty. So we don't even have a locked in top 15 players.
Right.
Go try to get into that group, get younger. Maybe it is a guy like, maybe a guy, I don't think that Jerry Jeudy's not falling to the end of the he might fall to the end of the first, but he's not falling to the second round based on landing spot. But I'm trying to think of
T. Higgins, Rager.
Yeah, T. Higgins, Rager. Justin Jefferson might be there. He's a guy I like.
Yeah, maybe.
So if you need a wide receiver and you got some running back depth, I think that's a trade I'd make all day. Running back wise, I don't see any of the top 4 or 5 guys. Maybe Clyde Edwards-Helaire, if he lands in a bad spot, could fall to the end of the second or the beginning of the second. But
maybe Cam Akers if in a SuperFlex, if say Jordan Love goes top 10 or something like that.
3 or 4 quarterbacks. Yeah, I'm high on Akers. I think
Me too.
I think teams are going to be high on Akers, so I just don't see any way.
Sending that propaganda out.
I don't see there's any way he's not falling to the second at least. Maybe later first. I'm hoping to get him at like 8 or 9 in a few leagues. I got a 9th pick that I'm like, oh man, if I could get Cam Akers, I'd be. But
I have 10 in a couple of leagues, and I'm just like, yeah, scoop up. For
a bad
or
spot.
maybe. Or maybe it's a guy like Dobbins and he doesn't go to a spot that you love. There's plenty of options. There's plenty of talent in this draft, especially in SuperFlex. Somebody's going to get pushed down to the end of that first round that you're going to like a straight up trade of David Johnson for that guy, especially if they land in a pretty cush spot. I'm a Justin Jefferson guy, so Justin Jefferson's going to be on a lot of my squads. So, that's the type of player I think you're getting for a David Johnson. To me, there's 15 in SuperFlex. There's 15 really good prospects that I would like having on my team. And if I can get a pick in those top 15, if it's on the later end, 12, 13, 14, 15, maybe even, if it's the 14th or 15th pick in the draft, I might even try to squeeze in, give me a third next year too. Cause it's a 14th pick. Like who's going to be there? Those are the types of things that's how I win more trades than I lose is, I always say, ask for more. What's going to hurt if they say no, you asked. And if they say yes, you win. And if they say, well, let's work something out. I had a trade earlier where I swapped thirds. So I went up 12 picks or almost 12 picks in a 14-team league. I went up 12 picks in the third round. That's the difference between a Brandon Ayuk or a guy that I don't even know the name of. And so, those are the types of things that you add into a trade that can really push it over the edge without the other person feel like they're getting screwed, if that makes sense.
So the moral of the story here is that
Ethan will always ask for more.
Ethan could almost talk me into David Johnson if I didn't hate this trade so much. So almost.
You want him. Josh is over here like, man, he makes some good points.
But I can just imagine you talking to someone during the trade negotiations and them going, I started this really hating David Johnson, but now I kind of want him on my team. And Ethan's like, that's exactly what I wanted from you.
So this is what I do when Ethan starts talking to me about a trade. I hit the mute button. I don't want his car salesmanship to change my mind.
Hey, trading is all about the art of the negotiation. I always tell people, if you this is my advice to anybody who wants to trade David Johnson, you go make the deal. Don't say, well, David Johnson's on the block, because this is what I anytime I see so and so's on the block, I want to get rid of this guy. Give me what you can.
Yep.
And so instead of being that guy that's just like, well, so and so's on the block, I usually will go look for a player that I think is that could realistically I could get for a David Johnson. And then I see that, I'll send him a trade that's like, hey, here's David Johnson straight up for the 204. What do you think? Or not really 202, I guess, or 203 is probably the latest I go. You got the 202, 12-team league, it's pretty competitive. Probably not going to get the guy you want there. What do you think about David Johnson? And I'll probably throw that out there with a third next year off the top. Just be like, hey, 202, third next year. Who cares about that third? You don't even know who that guy's going to be. And if they say, well, I don't really know, I'm not sure. Okay, 202, fourth this year. Okay, what can you do? Okay, 202, third next year. I'll throw in a fourth this year. And then it's back to the same deal, and I'm getting rid of a pick that I'm probably not even going to have on my roster by the time the league starts anyway.
Mm-hmm.
But the thing is that if I don't go out and initiate that trade, if I just say, hey, David Johnson's on the block, guess what they're sending me? A freaking third or a fourth and a third next year.
Yep.
And so then I'm looking at offers that I hate, and I'm now trying to negotiate their price up.
In the hole, yeah.
And they're like, well, you're trying to get rid of him, dude. Like, why would I give you any more? And
exactly.
So that's the thing with trading is if you want to get rid of a guy, you go make the trade and then talk them into it. It's a lot easier than you just saying, hey, come get him, and then just taking the scraps that people give you. Just trust me, because the guy with the 202 is not going to be like, oh, well, I'm going to go use this on David Johnson. You have to approach them. They might not even know that David Johnson's available. And so...
Yeah, and the thing kind of to wrap this up, because I love kind of the trade theory talk. I also feel like David Johnson is a guy that you can use as a chip, and it's just, hey, maybe you have Julio, and you're like, God, I really love DeAndre now that he's in Arizona. He's going to be fired. You go, hey, Julio and David Johnson for DeAndre. Maybe you have to throw a third in there too. But everyone goes, Julio and DeAndre, they're kind of close, except for age. David Johnson, he's kind of a name, and like you said, Ethan, he could blow up. And then you've used
everybody's looking for running backs.
Yeah.
Everybody's looking for running backs.
And to you, he's just a throw-in because you're trying to just increase that value slightly to get up to where DeAndre is. But to the other guy, it may be a piece that he is really into. And it could work out. It may not work out. But, that's another thing, too. I think sometimes people get so gung-ho and I need to trade David Johnson, so it has to be David Johnson for something, instead of saying, well, can David Johnson be part of a package that gets me an upgrade at a position? And that's another way that sometimes I talk to people about trading, and I go, these guys like David Johnson, throw them in as a chip and just see if you can increase your value to move up a couple of spots in a positional ranking. But that was an awesome talk, and we're going to get into some of the stuff that Bill and I saw on the timeline. And Bill and I were talking about this trade, and Ethan, we were chatting about it. I really want to get your opinion on this. So this is from our man Jerry O'Shea at Jerry Shea FF. So he gave up Derrick Henry, David Montgomery, and Alshon Jeffrey, and he received Damian Harris, 2020 103, 203, and 303. So, Ethan, since Bill and I were chatting about this before we went live, what do you think about this trade? Which side do you think won?
12-team SuperFlex.
Okay,
yes,
that's what I was going
to
ask.
mention that.
Because, like I said, these rookie picks, I like anything in the top 15 a lot more than I like anything after that pick. And so, I don't love dealing guys before they, especially guys like Derrick Henry, who I think will end up increasing their value as the as this process of the offseason goes on. I feel like Derrick Henry is worth less right now than he is right before the season starts, or even mid-season. And so if I'm trading studs, I don't really love to trade studs outside of right before the trade deadline in the league, just because to me, that's when you're going to get the guy that's willing to overpay the most. The dude that says I'm a Derrick Henry away from making a serious championship run. If he's rebuilding, obviously the 103, that's a premium pick. Damian Harris, I liked him as a prospect. I don't trust any running back from New England, and he's the one that has the most years left. And so maybe he pans out if Sony Michel can't get his injury thing figured out. We don't even know who their quarterback's going to be. I just don't see any way that Damian Harris makes a huge impact for you again this year. The 203, that's a nice pick. 303 is kind of again, more of a lottery ticket than a guaranteed stud. I'll be honest, I haven't really liked, I've done a few mock drafts, and pretty much anything after like the end of the second, like 208 to 210, that's kind of where I feel like there's a second teardrop from guys that I really like are in the top 15. And then there's like a group of like 5 or 6 guys that I like pretty well. And then it goes into a bunch of dudes that I don't really have a really strong feeling about one way or the other. So I'm not huge on the 303. To me, this is probably a little bit cheap of a sell for Derrick Henry, especially if you're going to take a running back at 103. It might be a little different if you're looking for a quarterback in a SuperFlex league and you're hoping to land like a Tua. I think Tua is really the only reason. I don't think Joe Burrow's fallen to 3. Does anybody think Joe Burrow's fallen to 3? No, Joe Burrow's not fallen to 3. He maybe falls to 2, but he ain't fallen to 3. And so I think in most drafts you're either getting Tua or Jonathan Taylor. Derrick Henry and Jonathan Taylor are pretty equivalent to me, at least this, in the next year or two, unless Jonathan Taylor goes to a place that he's just going to absolutely eat. So that's kind of a wash. I mean, they're equal picks unless you're getting Tua. And then if you're getting Tua, okay, and you need a quarterback especially, I don't hate it because at least you're getting a franchise guy that I do think is a good quarterback. But then you're still looking at, is Derrick Henry worth Tua plus? I mean, I don't think so in a super flex.
Right.
But Tua has some concerns himself. I mean, Derrick Henry, we know what Derrick Henry is. I mean, Tua's hip is, while everything has been good in terms of the reports since his injury, everything has been good, which is great. I mean, I'm on board with Tua in the top 3 picks of a rookie draft, especially in Superflex. But is that risk worth getting away from a guy that's pretty basically locked into an RB1 season? That's assuming, of course, that he doesn't catch more passes, which he should. He should be used in the pass game more because he's a freak. Derrick Henry, that is. So Damian Harris, I'm going to put Tua on this pick. I like it better if I add a player. So we got, Damian Harris, Tua, the 203. Let's go best case scenario. I think Jalen Reagor is probably best case scenario falling to 203. So we'll go Reagor and then 303. I think again, best case scenario here. I really like Brandon Ayuk. He's a guy that could fall to this spot. I don't know how you guys feel about AJ Dillon. Another running back, big chunky running back, a la Derrick Henry. If you like Derrick Henry, you probably like AJ Dillon.
Right.
But I don't think Dillon's anywhere near the running back that Derrick Henry is.
Exactly.
Let's stick with the wide receiver. let's go Michael Pittman here at 303. I don't think he's going to last this long, but
No, he's going to be a lot closer to the 203 than the 303. I think.
Really?
By the time
Man.
it's said and done.
I love
That's-
Pittman. Love Pittman.
Gosh, that's tough for me because I don't feel like in the circles that I talk to that are not fantasy circles, I don't feel like Pittman gets as much love as what he gets when I'm just talking. And I don't feel like I haven't heard anybody hyping him up. But okay,
Right.
so that's probably unrealistic.
Well, Bill, you've been doing some rookie mocks. What's usually around in that 303 area?
Yeah, what are you looking at there? Because I don't like most of these guys, so I'm looking for people that I kind of like.
I mean, the good thing
So
about
we're going
this
best
trade,
case scenario because I don't know if I like this trade, but we're going best case scenario just for comparison's sake.
and I think.
All right.
Oh, here we go.
No, go ahead. I got to pull it up. So
Well, I was going to say, and I think, Ethan, you talk about really liking 15 guys. So
Mhm.
this trade does get you two
Guys.
of those 15 guys, which is, if the person on the other side is feeling like you are, they're getting kind of two cracks at guys that they really like, which I think is important because, I mean, really, if we take a look at it, and this is just me personally, everybody's going to feel a little bit differently. I think Alshon is toast. Unfortunately.
Yeah, Alshon is a non-factor in this. I mean, maybe he's worth 303, but I wouldn't even really trade the 303 for Alshon right now.
David Montgomery, I
think David Montgomery for the 203 is probably fair.
Fair.
One to one. If I think David Johnson's worth the 203, then I definitely feel like David Montgomery is worth the 203.
Agreed.
So I mean, I think you're looking at the 303 over Alshon, the 203 over, or pretty equal to Montgomery. And then you're looking at just Damian Harris and the 103. Is that enough to get you Derrick Henry? I don't think so. So, I mean, right. I don't feel like value-wise this is really a fair trade unless you need a guy like Tua, unless you're really hurting at quarterback. And so.
And this seems like the classic rebuild versus contender trade. So.
But I think if I'm rebuilding, I want this whole package on the right side, all those picks and Damian Harris. I want all that for Derrick Henry. If it's me, me personally, right. If I'm giving up my stud, I want a full breadth of depth for me to give up a stud. And again, this is why I think this was a trade that would have been better suited in the middle of this season, even if you're rebuilding,
right? Because
you're going to get more value from a contending team, and you can pick the prospects and the guys you want.
Right.
Versus, here we're looking at, draft picks that could be anyone. Some people like that. Me, right. I like knowing what I'm getting.
So on that note, Bill, what do you have it pulled up, and we can see kind of what 203 and 303 look like?
Sure. So actually, those mocks got deleted, so I wasn't able to find them. But a couple weeks ago, I did a mock with some podcast guys. There was 4 of us, and so basically, 103 was Taylor because the 2 quarterbacks were taken. 203 is like Jordan Love, Mims. Pittman was actually taken 206. There's Chenault, Dillon. Rager went just before that, and then 303 was like it's like Devin Duvernay, Donovan Peoples-Jones, Hamler, Jalen Hurts, but this is before the whole Hurts thing started pushing. So that's kind of where that is.
What about do you know where Chase Claypool's going? He's a guy that I think
Claypool went a little later in the 3rd.
Okay. So that's a guy that I kind of like at the beginning of the 3rd. He's in that second tier of dudes that I'm willing to take a shot on. But still, I mean, I think we kind of laid it out there. There's really not that 303 is kind of a crapshoot at this point. Yep. You don't know what you're going to get. There's no guarantee you're even going to get a guy that maybe even you're targeting there. Like I said, I, for one, like Michael Pittman. The 303 it doesn't sound like he's going to be there. And so then you're looking at, maybe Brandon Ayuk falls to like 210, and then you may, package this pick in a 5th or I don't know how many rookie draft picks you have, but you use this pick in another trade to get you higher in the draft, and maybe you can use this 303 and a late second to move up into that top 15, and then you get 3 top 15 guys, which I do like. But still, I mean, I still think value-wise, this is probably a little low for what you're giving up, and that's a shame because I love my boy Jerry. So he's sad. I see your sad face, Jerry. I'm sad for you. You know, I'm sad for you, but it's not a bad haul if you need a guy like Tua. Even if you get a guy like Jonathan Taylor, I think you're still in a pretty good spot. It's just not the haul that I'm looking for.
So Jerry, you kind of got our opinions on it. You know, don't be sad. You can still turn that 303. Maybe you have David Johnson. Turn David Johnson and that 303 into 201, and you'll be all right. But we're gonna kind of go lightning round here with a couple of questions as we end it. We got one in the chat that I want to go into. So just quick yes or no, and maybe a couple sentences. Could Mariota take Carr's starting position? Bill, why don't we start with you?
Yes, but I don't think he will. I mean, my biggest concern is his elbow, right? Like that was a huge concern, and I mean, he still had numbness last season, and this was from the year before. So that's my biggest concern. So there you go. That's my couple sentences.
So doctor, how do you feel about Marcus's elbow?
It's a unique injury. Basically got hit on his elbow, and that sending nerve, it hit the nerve, and so that nerve basically went totally numb, so he couldn't grab a football. I'm pretty sure it was the ulnar nerve. The ulnar nerve runs basically right under your elbow, so it's right on the surface. This is the funny bone. Like if you pop your elbow, you're usually hitting your ulnar nerve, and so it's one of those injuries that when you damage a nerve, it takes a long time for it to really feel good again. And it sounds like he had a pretty significant injury of that ulnar nerve. And so I don't know. I think they're bringing him in as depth more than anything. I think they kind of lost out on any of the quarterbacks they were looking for to replace Carr. So they said, you know what, we're just going to go with Carr. Maybe they'll pick a quarterback in the draft if one falls to them. They're not really in a good spot to get a quarterback at the start of this draft, unless you're looking at a guy like Jacob Eason, or maybe they like Jordan Love enough to take him there. But I think what they said with Mariota was, we're going to go in with Carr and Mariota. If they both stink, they both stink. But at least we have 2 reasonable options. We're just going to surround them. We're just going to go best player available in the draft, and so that's kind of what I think their plan is here.
So. Yes, I do think Mariota can take Carr's starting position, and it's more because of the relationship between Gruden and Carr. Doesn't seem like it's the best, and apparently Gruden loved Mariota.
I feel like Gruden loved everybody that he interviewed.
So true.
He did love everybody, but it seemed like he was
he loved Jameis too.
Yeah, and
I say bring Jameis in there too. 3-way quarterback battle.
He's going to be starting in New England. Don't worry about it. So I just want to see that for the comedy of it. Bill Belichick just literally pulling hair out while Jameis throws 32 interceptions. But I do think Mariota could take over, and I just think it's because Carr and Gruden don't seem to have the best relationship. Now, do I think he can pull a Tannehill? No. So, I mean, I feel like this time next year you're going to see Oakland either trying to do something in the draft if they don't pull something off this year, or trying to dip into free agency and grab somebody. So there were a couple more questions that we saw on the timeline that I want to get your guys' opinion on. So recently tagged Kenyon Drake is in this trade. So this is from Jacob Vines at jsnake_DFF. Which side would you take? It's a 12-team PPR league. Kenyon Drake or Mecole Hardman and a 2021 second? Ethan, why don't you start off?
I'm going to go with Drake just because I think running backs matter. We saw what Drake can do in this offense. That was without basically a good offensive line. I think they're adding a solid offensive tackle. It'd be stupid not to.
Right.
at a minimum, but we know they've already added an elite wide receiver prospect that's going to help space everybody out. They want to run everyone wide. They've got like 7 wide receivers to do that now, to cycle the dudes in. And so, you know, they're building an offense that is going to be friendly to the running back. And so Kenyon Drake looks like a guy that, you know, could potentially be a 1-year top 12, you know, kind of out of the blue guy that, you know, he showed us last year that he can be that. And so give him a full year in this system. I'm going to go Drake here just because I think he's going to give you that immediate value. And I don't feel like this return is enough to make me want to second guess that.
What about you, Bill?
Yeah, I mean, with the information we have now, I 100% agree with that. You know, maybe a week ago, my answer might be closer to, you know, coin flip, but the fact that Drake is the number 1 guy, and, you know, Hardman, you know, I like him, but he's gonna be their third option in the receiving game. So I think Drake is a guy that I would take, and if he blows up early and I fall out of contention, I'm moving him like immediately.
Yeah, and you guys, we're gonna make it 3 for 3. You can call me on my cell phone. It's definitely Drake. I mean, you guys tackled it all. There's nothing really
so smooth.
That's so bad.
It was so bad. It
that.
was good, Bill.
I love that. I don't know what you're talking about.
See, Ethan liked it. He might be the new co-host. So you watch yourself. So.
Smooth.
We got another one here. Mark Mathick, I hope I got that right, at Master June 70, 12-team SuperFlex Dynasty. He traded away Dak for the 2020-103 Marlon Mack in a 2021 second. So are you taking Dak or the package, Bill?
Dak.
Easy.
Yeah, I mean, just getting you're getting a top, like, let's even be conservative and say a top 8 quarterback. Like, I mean, and there's no question he's that. Like, I mean, you're gonna take 103. Okay, let's say you end up with Tua. Like, you have no idea where he lands or what he's gonna become. We think we know. Mac, I mean, I'm not super excited about him. Just because of his lack of receiving for the most part. And then, like, a second, you know, I mean, it's fine, but that doesn't do a lot for me.
What about you, Ethan?
I'm going to go with Dak too. Gosh, you know, I am a Tua guy. I like Tua as a prospect. If he ends up in Miami, he might not even play this year. Right. I can see 3 or 4 different teams that he could realistically end up on in this draft where he would not play this year. Whether it be the Lions take him at 3, you know, someone trades up to 4. I mean, the Chargers seem like a pretty prime contender right now to trade up. That would be really the only case, and even then, they could still justify playing Tyrod for half the year. Yep. Dak, you're getting you know, like Bill said. I mean, top 8 quarterback. That's being generous. I've seen him going I would say he's probably at 6 or 7 for me, and so and that's only because I think there's like 7 elite fantasy quarterbacks right now.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, this is a good that's a good group of 5 guys in front of him. So, you know, it's you can't really be upset about getting the dude that's behind Mahomes, Lamar Jackson, Russell Wilson. I guess you're going to put Kyler Murray. I think that's a little premature, even with DeAndre Hopkins. But I'm seeing Kyler Murray go there. You know, I mean, then that's when you start talking about Dak being, you know, the next guy. I mean, it's kind of like Dak and Wentz, and I think Dak's pretty clearly ahead of Wentz for me right now in Dynasty. And so, you know, maybe you really like Baker. I don't know. I don't know. Again, I think the hype's still a little bit too far ahead. So minimum, I mean, best case, you're looking at, I can only name 4 off the top of my head that I would take before him.
How about Deshaun? Would you take him before him?
Losing Hopkins, I mean, I don't think it bumps him down, but I think it puts them in a similar category.
Yeah.
I mean, realistically, I mean, one of them has a star wide receiver and one of them has a horrible offensive line, and it has Will Fuller as his wide receiver 1. I mean, this isn't exactly like best case scenario. I don't think enough people are talking about just how bad that Texans offense might possibly look without Hopkins being an elite wide receiver safety valve for them. I mean, the dude does it all. And so
And by the way, we talk about that offensive line. They have to re-sign Laramie Tunsil, and now he literally has them over a barrel because if they lose him and they gave up a couple of firsts to get him and Kenny Stills, I mean, they're screwed. So he really has them over a barrel. They almost have to re-sign him or completely just say that team is a rebuild.
Yeah. And so, I mean, you're looking at this trade. I just feel like Dak is worth more than this right now. I like Tua. He's going to be a good piece, assuming that Tua falls to you. Maybe you get Jonathan Taylor. I don't know if you need running backs. We don't know what his other quarterback situation looks like. If he has a Mahomes or he has a Lamar Jackson, maybe he drafted well last year or 2 years ago, and has Lamar Jackson, so he doesn't really need Dak. You always need Dak in SuperFlex. But, Marlon Mack, I just don't think this is a deal that justifies trading a guy like Dak, even if I do like Tua at 103 and the 2021 second. That's who knows? That could be a 212, and then we're looking at this like this is the worst trade on the planet. It's not. It's closer than the worst trade on the planet. But what I'm saying is we don't know what that 2021 second is yet. So I always approach next year's pick as 206. So 12-team league, you get the middle of the pack because that's the numbers show that it's going to be somewhere, it's closest to being 206. Most likely, depending on the team that you're getting it from, you might even be able to say that it's going to be worse or maybe a little bit better, but still you're looking 204 to 208, somewhere in there. So I don't think this is enough. Again, I don't think it's enough.
I wanted to bring this up because the poll results ended up 54-46 in favor of the package. And this is something I kind of scream from the rooftops all the time. See what you can get for those picks. Obviously, if you have the 103 and you can scoop a couple of extra pieces together, about half the time it looks like you're going to be able to get a guy like Dak Prescott. And trust me, if I can scoop together the 103, a wide receiver, a running back 3 in a 2021 second round pick for Dak, hey, I'll give you that. Hey, change Marlon Mack with David Johnson. We keep bringing his name up, but I mean, if you're telling me right now I can give you those pieces and get Dak back, it's kind of the 4 quarters for a dollar theory that everyone talks about. Yeah, it kind of equals out, but it's not really the same. So, that was kind of the lightning round. We're going to wrap this up, but Ethan, I want to say thanks. I listen to you pretty much everywhere you are.
You were busy last week.
Such a fanboy.
You were everywhere last week.
Dude, I think I did like 6 different podcasts last week. It was a wild time. I was supposed to do a video for the headliners too, but with this virus going around, it's gotten a little wild for everybody. So I haven't done another video yet, but it's coming.
Well, yeah, and at one point I was like, did I listen to this podcast already? Because Ethan's on, and I felt like I listened to like 2 with him. I had to double check to make sure I wasn't re-listening to a podcast I had already listened to. So, but we want to give you this time here, just, let people know where to follow you, let people know. It might take you 10 minutes just for everyone to know where you're at. But you're one of like 2 guys that I kind of follow and actually listen to their medical advice, because your sound and what you say actually ends up being what happens most of the time. There's a lot of guys out there who say they're doctors and they follow things, and you listen to them and you're like, this isn't really what ended up happening. So you're legit, and I just want to make sure that everyone that listens to us knows where to follow you and where they can find you.
Well, dude, I appreciate that, because I mean, my goal is I want to be right, and so I actually appreciate you guys bringing me on, and I like that this wasn't like a medical dominated podcast. I mean, obviously, I do have a doctorate. I do talk about injuries. That's my niche. That's the thing that I love. But I also have a little bit of a mindset that I'm not just a doctor. I know how to talk about fantasy football too. I mentioned on a different show last week, I think it was Trade Axe, that the the Trade Addicts pod, which you should go listen to. I mean, like I said, follow me on Twitter at @eTurnerFF_PT. I had 5 podcasts drop last week, all about injuries, all about all these things. If that's something you really want to do, I mean, I'm your guy for that. But I mentioned on that show that, part of the thing that I think makes me unique, even among the other medical professionals that talk about fantasy football, is that I'm obsessed with fantasy football as much as I'm obsessed with talking about medicine and doing medical things. And so I really have always wanted to be the bridge between the both. I mean, these are my 2 passions. Obviously, I know the most about the medical stuff because I went to school for a freaking long time to be able to talk about it. And I want to apply that and be a source of resources for people that have questions about injuries with NFL players, about fantasy. But I also really love just sitting down and chatting about dynasty theory, talking about trades, talking about just fantasy football. And I think the thing that makes me unique in this small niche of healthcare providers that are talking about fantasy football is that I also tend to be pretty good at fantasy football by itself. And I can have a conversation for an hour and 10 minutes with you guys. And we didn't even really bring up that much about, I mean, we put some nuggets in there. But for the most part, it was just us talking about fantasy football. And so I hope that people find that valuable because I really pride myself on being good at both. That said, like I said, you can follow me on Twitter at @eTurnerFF_PT. I do mostly talk about injuries on Twitter. I will talk about just fantasy football in general, something that I find interesting. It's one of those, my Twitter handle, my Twitter is solely football related. It is 98.5% football tweets. Now, at this current point in time, I am talking a little bit about this huge virus that's going around because it's affecting my personal life. It's affecting your personal life. It's going to affect a lot of people. So I'm trying to get good information that I find valuable in my own life out to people about that. But for the most part, it's all about football. I mean, that's why I have this Twitter. Anyone who follows me will tell you that 99% of the time it's only football, and that's all I really care about. That's all I really follow. I only have a Twitter because I wanted to talk about fantasy football. I didn't have a Twitter before that. Before I ever got into this industry, it's literally just for me to follow to talk about fantasy football. Things I do, obviously I love to talk. And so you can find me on the SuperFlex SuperShow podcast that I do with FF Stompy, Scott Fishbowl champion. He'll love that I said that with him. James the Brain, John Hogue, that's a show that I do every week with those guys. That's kind of the podcast that I'm on the most. As far as what my main thing that I'll be doing this year is actually with the Fantasy Headliners. It's on YouTube. It's a totally new world for me. Like I said, I've done writing, I've done podcasting, but now I want to get into video. I want to use that tool in a way that is unique. It's not like anything else you're going to see on YouTube. It's me talking and describing these injuries, especially once we get into the season with basically a breakdown with visuals. It's engaging. I enjoy those guys over there. So that's where most of my stuff this year is going to be. It's actually with the Fantasy Headliners. And then I got this big project I've been working on for a while here. My magnum opus, my most important thing that I do for the fantasy community is actually a lot of data collection for college players coming into the NFL. I'm doing a full injury guide. And so what I do is, for each player, I spend between 30 and 45 minutes actually researching their injury history. And so one of the biggest predictors of future injury is actually previous injury. So you got to know where a guy's weak to know where he's more likely to get hurt in the future. The problem is that nobody, 0 people collect data on college injuries. And so we have plenty of resources to find, and we got entire websites devoted to finding injuries that happen to a guy once they get to the NFL, but nobody has this data.
Oh, did we lose them?
I think we might have lost them. Thank you, froze.
Yeah.
Do you think I kind of hear something, but I'm not sure.
You okay? Blink once.
I think he froze on us, but it's It's
So
unfortunate.
let me go a little bit further with what he was talking about.
Yeah.
So not only there
I'm
we
sorry.
go. No, you're good.
Anyway, so I collect these injury histories. That's what I do. I go in, I collect injury history data. I'm just short of 70 prospects for this class. Top quarterbacks, wide receivers, tight ends, running backs, and then I also am doing IDP players as well this year. So if you're into IDP, I collect data for all of those. I'll do offensive line this year. I'm not going to do that many because they don't really matter for fantasy, but I have a few people that purchased the guide that wanted me to do a few offensive linemen as well. So I've got a few of those guys. It's $10. You're only paying $10, one, so that I can justify spending hours and hours and hours, like I said, 30 to 45 minutes per player. And so the fact that I've already got 60 players done tells you that I've been doing this freaking a lot, and I'm going to probably be closer to 150 by the time I'm done. For $10, you reach out to me on Twitter, DM me. $10, I'm going to give you access to my master document, which has already, about 60 players on there, all their injury histories, a breakdown of what happened after the injury. So how many games they missed.
Come on, Ethan, you can do it.
When they occurred, time.
All right. It looks like Ethan's internet connection's kind of gotten weak on us. So, but
yeah,
you can talk to him on Twitter and order that, and it's $10, and you'll get a lot of information that you're not going to get anywhere else. So I think it's frozen again. But yeah, I mean, honestly, Ethan's putting in the work. It's $10. Honestly, I don't know if there's a better deal for any fantasy football guide, period. I mean, the dude is breaking down injuries, which is so important because probably 90% of us, 95% of us that play fantasy and dynasty, we hear about injuries and we hear people on networks tell us, hey, this knee injury is usually 4 to 6 weeks. And, that's the only information we get. We don't know what that's going to lead to down the road. If it leads to anything down the road, we don't know how that raises a percentage of a chance that this injury is going to reoccur, or if there's a compensation injury that could occur. And we don't know any of that stuff. Ethan knows this stuff, and he's deep diving into this stuff so that you have the knowledge going into your rookie drafts, as you're looking at maybe players that you want to get, before the 2021 rookie draft starts up. You kind of know these injury histories, and every piece of information is a leg up that you have over anyone that you're playing with. And there's so much information out there that it's hard to gain an advantage. This is an advantage. And for $10, you really can't go wrong, because I know I spend probably way too much to play fantasy football. A lot of us do. So $10 is a drop in the bucket to gain an advantage.
Yeah, just for reference, sorry, my internet is a little spotty right this second. Just for reference, this was the difference for me just in my own personal drafts. Knowing these injury histories was the difference between drafting Christian McCaffrey over Leonard Fournette a few years ago. Obviously, that has paid off big dividends. And then last year or 2 years ago, it was the difference between picking Nick Chubb over a guy like Sony Michel, Rashad Penny. It's not always going to be that huge gap. But if you have 3 or 4 guys that you think are all pretty close, knowing this injury history information could be the difference between taking a guy, that could pay off huge for you down the road, and taking a guy that just is not producing at those elite numbers the way you want to, or not staying on the field. I know that, obviously Leonard Fournette had a great season last year, but I don't think anyone's taking him over Christian McCaffrey right now. And so, if you have two guys that are pretty close, having that injury history data could be the difference between a Christian McCaffrey and a Leonard Fournette. You could be sitting on a team that has Nick Chubb instead of, guys that are worrying if Sony Michel is going to put a 1,000-yard season up anytime soon, or a guy like Rashad Penny who had some injuries coming into school. I was higher on Chubb because of, one, I thought his injury history was overblown, which I mentioned in the guide. And I thought that it was less concerning than a guy like even Michelle, who wasn't being talked about as an injury risk. So, I think again, it's one more tool, and I'm the only one that's got this tool. I mean, you could feel free to go, if someone else wants to take this off my hands and go look up 150 injury histories and write all this stuff down for me, I will gladly pay them $10 to do that. But I don't see anyone signing up. So it's definitely worth it, I think.
I will not do any of that, A, because I'm not qualified, and B, because the amount of time you put into it is insane. But Ethan, again, we appreciate it, man. We're glad you come on. I hope we can get you on a couple times during the season just to break down some big time injuries. Unfortunately, they're going to happen, but it's good to
talk football.
Yeah, and talk football. But
I love talk football.
It's always good to have a knowledgeable guy because I have a doctorate in giving my opinion, but unfortunately, I didn't have to go to school at all to do that. You have the training, you have the knowledge, but and you briefly talked about it. Everybody, just kind of a little PSA. We all know what's going on in the world with COVID right now. Just everybody be safe. Listen to what doctors are telling you to do. Wash your hands, social distancing, all that kind of stuff. And don't do anything crazy and get yourself or someone else sick. So on that note, Bill, I think we're out of here.
Late.